All right, folks, may this be a good fundraiser.
Don't play that song for me, 'cause it brings back memories of days that I once knew, the days that I spent with you. Oh no, don't let it play. Oh no, fills my heart with pain.
Here's Toussaint.
Please stop it right away. I remember just what he said. He said, darling, I know that he lied. You know that you lied. You know that you lied. You lied. Hey, mister, don't play no more. Don't play no more. I can't stand it. Don't play no more. No more. I remember on our first date, he kissed me and he walked away.
Man,
I was only 17.
old pictures.
I never dreamed.
Yes, Chewy. All right, everybody. I'm glad we're here. We're waiting just a few more minutes. Keep the music going, Adam. Just a few more minutes until we get.
Wow, hold up.
No.
Focus on that picture.
Pass that picture.
Focus on that picture.
Oh, it's so good.
All right, folks. I'm so delighted to be with you today, and I can't think of a better way of starting off this moment than by asking Chewy to lead a chant. Chewy, how do you feel about that?
Oh, really? Come on, man. All right. I get kicked out of my building. It's your fault. No, I'm joking.
Everybody else, unmute yourself so you can participate.
All right. So what chant should we lead? You're the one asking for a chant, so.
Suggestions from the floor.
UIC is whack. Bring the trauma center back.
Yes.
That's the only one I can think of back then with those pictures.
Take it away, Chewy.
UIC is whack. Bring the trauma
center
back.
UIC is whack.
Bring
the trauma center
back.
All right, folks. One more time, Chewy. One more time.
UIC is whack.
Bring
the trauma center back.
All right. That definitely reminds me of something. So then that's what we're here for tonight, right? We're here to celebrate. We're here to remember. And we're here to keep fighting. So I'm going to be emceeing. And I want to begin by noting that some of us have been here for a long, long time. STOP started in 2004. And there's a crazy story about how it all began. It has something to do with secret diagrams and a righteous thief and all this stuff. In fact, is there somebody here who wants to tell that story? Is Matt here?
I didn't hear about no secret stuff in the past.
Alex, do you want to tell this one or should we move forward?
I think Duff got it right. There was a secret diagram. Let's leave it at that.
So that's how STOP started. And you can add, well, we're going to stick around at the end of the Zoom after it's all done and you can hear the truth. But let's move forward now to note something, a little known fact about STOP. When STOP started, it was not the Southside Together Organizing for Power, which is what most of us think of when we hear the acronym. STOP originally was the Student Tenant Organizing Project. And STOP got involved with a lot of other acronyms along the way. And many of us are here because of those acronyms, right? We were here because of one or another group. SSN, SHE, TC Prayers, GSU. I want to note that GSU was started from the very beginning in solidarity with STOP. And in fact, Toussaint, who's on this Zoom, led the Apple Action, which was GSU's first public action, just a little while before he walked up those same steps chanting about a trauma center. And today there are new acronyms. There's UChicago Against Displacement, defund the UC police, groups I've never even heard of. So we're from a lot of acronyms and we remember all those groups today. And as we gather, we also remember the people who aren't with us in the body anymore. Damian Turner, who is one of Chicago's great leaders. Deborah Thomas, who spent her whole life in the struggle. Fred Payne, somebody who had a spirit of peace and generosity. Helen Morley and Jeanette Hansen, people who told our city exactly what it meant to have mental health clinics shut down. So we think of all those people. Anyone else? Who else should we think of?
Deborah Taylor is in the chat right there. Yeah,
Yes.
remember her.
Yeah, Deborah Taylor.
All of these people, they're people who made history. And we're a part of that history today. We've done a lot as a part of that history. All of us are part of a collective in one or another way that has a collective that's done many things, right? We've tried hard to cross the boundary that separates students from neighbors. We've gotten arrested together. We've said prayers together. We've had meetings together that started at 1 in the morning. And we fought to preserve affordable housing in Grove Park, and we won. We started the trauma center campaign in 2010 after Damien was killed, and we got a trauma center in 2015. We fought the city of Chicago for a community benefits agreement, and we got a community benefits agreement in 2020. And so our question today is, how can we carry that history forward? For those of you who are students right now, you carry that history forward by organizing the next generation of allies. And for those of us who are alums, we carry that history forward by supporting, right? If we have income, that means devoting some of that income, becoming a pipeline that helps STOP have the dollars it needs to continue. And it also means being a national network, being a resource for strategy and support over the years. So I'm going to start with some housekeeping. If you have, so tonight, you know, we're going to be here for a while. Stay as long as you can. At the end, there's a music video, I promise. We're going to have 4 speakers. We'll have breakout rooms, time to hang out, time to make commitments of various kinds. And so as we settle in for the night, change your Zoom name. If you can, just add, and you change your Zoom name to add your graduation year, your pronouns, the group you belong to, anything else that you find interesting. Take a minute to do that. And while you're doing that, keep your eye out for 2 special people I want to note. Dominic Surya, he's the person who made this all come together. Dominic has been doing this since the days when he went out week after week to say prayers in front of a building that needed to become a trauma center. And he's still here doing it today. And also keep your eye out for Adam. Adam Light is the new face. He's a part of the new generation that's getting involved with STOP, and we appreciate that. Students, consider becoming Adam. Consider in particular Summerlinks. It's an internship-based program that will allow you to get resources from the U of C to spend a full summer committing yourself to this kind of work. While you're listening, while you're enjoying, upload some photos. I think Adam is gonna chat out a link to us, and that link it's a link to a drive where you can drop off whatever nice pictures that you have about your time together with the campaign. And Adam's also our DJ, so if you like the music, thanks to Adam. And lastly, as you're uploading pictures, show us the most important picture of all. Turn on your camera. Now, we know you can't always have your camera on every minute, but it means so much to see you. So when you can have it on, even if it's only sporadically, have that on.
I mean, use a filter if you want. That's what I'm using.
Yeah, definitely follow Chewy's filters. Chewy has absolutely the best filter, no doubt.
I'm about to change anyways.
Okay. All right. So in just a minute, I'm going to turn things over to our first speaker, but I want to spend a second kind of sharing a bit of a worry that I've had recently. It's about what it means to be a traditionalist and to think about being against tradition, right? So we're here because of a tradition that we've become a part of. And yet I'm here because I don't really believe in tradition, right? Because I think tradition constrains you. There are a lot of bad traditions in the world, and I want to be able to overcome them. It's easy to get wrapped up in victory. We've had a lot of victory, right? We've won a lot of things. And when you get wrapped up in victory, you freeze. And so what does it mean when your tradition is a tradition of anti-traditionalism? Like, how can we build that? How could we turn tradition into history? That's something that I'm worried about tonight. And I have a suggestion, entirely personal, that I'd like to put out. And that is that perhaps one of the most powerful ways to maintain a tradition that is not frozen is to be serious about where we fell short, right? What we should be remembering is not just a victory. We should be remembering what we didn't do, right? We should be remembering what we didn't happen. We should be keeping alive all of those dreams that didn't bloom, right? That sense of urgency has to, that we need, has to come from an awareness of our shortcomings and a sense of rage at what hasn't happened, right? A sense of anger that there aren't mental health clinics, a sense of dissatisfaction at the school system that exists, the inequalities, the Chicago Police Department, the University of Chicago's complicity in that, right? We have to nurture our anger at that. And we have to remember our own insufficiency as of this point, right? There's a beautiful document that I'll chat out to you at the end, so stick around. And the title of that document is "Every Society Gets the Failed Utopia It Deserves." Or another way of putting it, we need to hope high in order to deserve a good failed utopia tonight. That's a part of what we can do tonight, right? To remember the failed utopia and to make it real. I'll close my words by remembering something that happened in my own life. My grandmother died a little while ago. She was a painter. And when she died, she was in her late 80s. When she died, my mom found in her basement a painting on an easel that wasn't finished yet. A painting that wasn't finished was still sitting there. She'd been working on it in the very end of her life. And I remember that for a couple reasons. First of all, because she struggled into her last day, right? Until the last day of her life, she was trying to make that painting. And that's something that's important to us. Bill Drew, some of you know Bill Drew, who's an activist who's not with us anymore. And he cited for me a phrase of Bertolt Brecht's, "You can make a new start with your last breath," right? So my grandmother struggled until the last day of her life, and that's our duty too, right? But I also think about that story with my grandmother because there's something especially beautiful about the fact that the painting wasn't finished, right? It's something that she left for us to finish. And so when we come here, we need to leave something unfinished and be real about what we left unfinished because there are other people who are going to finish it. So with that, I turn the story over to our first speaker of the night. Please welcome Professor of African American Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, Toussaint Losier.
Who's that guy?
Dewey, you remember me. I remember you. Oh man. Thank you, Duff and Chewy for that introduction. I've been giggling over here for the past 5 minutes because first and foremost, I'm like, this introduction is so on brand for Duff. Y'all don't know. I'm sitting over here like, oh, I just like the way this person thinks and talks. It feels very much to me like a reunion. So I'm very much appreciative of the invitation and just the opportunity to I guess share some reflections with you all about what STOP is about and why it's the sort of organization that we should think seriously about how we can contribute to it and help support it into the future. And I'll try to not make people wait until the end to get to the point, which is, I think one of the things that's amazing to me about getting a chance to join you all tonight, maybe some of you all picked up on it in watching those pictures, but similar to what Duff said, you know, all of us should try to find ways to keep up the struggle, you know, through different parts of our lives, and to make it a consistent part of, you know, what we look to do every day. And I think if we're fortunate, one of the things that we get to experience is the way in which we not only help to win victories, but we transform ourselves in the process of being involved in the struggle. And I think one of the things that's exciting, for me, one of the things that's sort of most exciting about this meeting tonight is the way in which we have an opportunity not just to reflect on the victories that STOP has won and helped win, and is going to win in the future, but also the ways in which we can look back on the last, 16 years, and see the way in which we've changed and have been changed ourselves, you know, as part of that struggle. And I think that's one thing that I very much appreciate about the time that I've been involved in STOP is the way in which my work with STOP has helped to change the way in which I think about organizing, to change the way in which I think about political work, and has really helped build relationships that have stayed with me through the rest of my life. One of the things that's really, it's Duff mentioned at the outset, one of the things that he sort of thought about with STOP is the way in which we sort of experienced it through these different acronyms or titles for the organization. First, it was the Angels of Death, and then it was the Southside Tenant Organizing Project, and then now Southside Together Organizing for Power. I'm kind of a tactile person, so I think about two things. First, I think about physical locations. So I think about the different offices STOP has had. The first time I started working with STOP, it was operating out of a like an office on top of, like, right next to what Daly's. I think Daly's is still at 63rd. So on the second floor, like right down the street from Daly's, kind of under that sort of like dinosaur-like L track that's sort of still there, and it sort of was located there. And then there was a stretch of time where it was operating out of like Matt's car, and then there was a stretch of time where we were meeting at like the Bessie Coleman Library, and then we were meeting in like the sort of like meeting room of an apartment building. I can't remember what street that was on, but it's like these different physical locations until it got to its present office space. Thinking about that, and then also different t-shirts. So I remember I have this t-shirt, which I very much treasure, from Fly, from back in like 2010. I don't know if you guys can make it out. This is like a poorly stenciled picture of Malcolm X. And it says, "I'm for truth no matter who sells it, and I'm for justice no matter who it's for or against." And I got that t-shirt as kind of part of the work that I was doing that sort of came out of some of the work that Fly was involved in, Fearless Leading by the Youth back in 2009, 2010. And one of the things that's amazing, one of the things that always makes me chuckle about that shirt is it reminds me of how I first got involved with STOP, which was running into Matt Ginsberg Jekyll when he was door knocking around condo conversions in Hyde Park back in 2006, 2007. And Matt was wearing this t-shirt from an obscure South African social movement that very few people knew about called the Western Cape Anti-Eviction Campaign. This is before it became the Chicago Anti-Eviction Campaign. And I don't know if you know about Matt, if you guys know Matt well, but Matt, until recently, has not always had the best, or I would say he hasn't had the best fashion sense, but he hasn't been like too particular about his fashion sense. So at that time, Matt was walking around with like a small t-shirt or like a medium t-shirt on, and you could tell he was wearing it in a way where it was like a little bit too tight on him back in the day when people wore shirts in a large kind of way. I see you, Matt. I see you in the comments. I remember walking up to Matt and be like, okay, where did you get that shirt from? And what are you doing? Because if you have that shirt, which was, you know, not something you could get pretty easily, I knew you were doing something serious. And lo and behold, I was able to get involved with STOP and really, you know, kind of put boots to the ground in some really important ways. And I'm very much thankful for that. Remember, that was not long before STOP and Fly got involved in the Audio Home campaign and was involved in trying to address conditions in the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center after the facility was shut down for a period of time, and young people there weren't able to get fresh underwear, kind of basic necessities, and the youth involved with Fly carried out protests at the county board. They came up with this like dope rap song that called out the county board president for his failure to address the conditions in the detention center, and was, you know, they were involved in building a coalition with students from the students and young people from the Southwest side and other parts of the city as well. And that work was really amazing in terms of how it helped me to kind of get a sense of like the politics of the city, where young people were in terms of dealing with the issues that confronted them around the criminal justice system, around the lack of jobs in the city, around the education system as well too, and some of the injustices that we find related to Chicago public schools. And I got to meet folks like Darius, Damien, Kennard, Butta, who I mentioned in the comments is somebody who's not with us right now. A whole host of young people who were involved in Fly, as well as a lot of the tenants who had cut their teeth in like previous tenant struggles on the South Side, and were involved in a lot of work around preserving Grove Park and fighting gentrification in different parts of Woodlawn. And it was really an amazing experience. I remember being really excited about the opportunity to run political education seminars with folks in STOP, and talking, wanting to share some of the sort of like kind of information that I had learned working with groups in South Africa around neoliberal policy and the way in which that sort of impacted their circumstances, and trying to sort of make connections between circumstances in countries like South Africa and how similar economic policies were impacting us here in the US. And being in these political education seminars where I was like too caught up in thinking like a University of Chicago student and trying to like explain what neoliberal policies were. And Deborah Taylor basically saying, who was one of the, this fiery tenant lead, well, fiery in her own sort of soft-spoken way, tenant leader off of Drexel saying, okay, neoliberalism is basically like vampire capitalism, right? Like it's capitalism, but it works at a particular way in which they just sort of keep sucking your blood at an even, in an even more kind of intense way. And it was really those kind of dynamics that were sort of, I found particularly transformative about STOP, in the way in which there was an opportunity to kind of obviously just go beyond the sort of classroom sort of political discussions or kind of campus political discussions, but find really dynamic ways to kind of blend some of the very like textbook kind of conversation around a particular issue and folks' like actual real world experiences. And that kind of dynamic really came to a head with the Trauma Center campaign, which I think I was most, I think one of the things that most struck me was that when the campaign was already going and when I stopped to sort of talk to people, one of the things that was really compelling was the fact that most of the time we talk about the Trauma Center campaign as being impacted by the death of Damien Turner and the fact that he was shot and killed just a couple blocks away from the University of Chicago Medical Center. But when, I really got to, took the time to talk to people and hear from them, what I learned was that this idea of needing an adult trauma center had been a part of people's conversations for a while. Activists and STOP and FLY and other community organizations have been pointing to the fact that there used to be a trauma center at the University of Chicago and had been closed down several decades ago. And there were young people and adults as well who had lost their lives in similar circumstances, not too different from, circumstances not too different from Damien's. And people had sort of brought up the issue. And in fact, Damien had been one of the people who had been involved in bringing up that issue. And so part of what made Damien's death so tragic was, and the kind of fight for the trauma center so important, was that not only was his story important in like a singular sense, but it connected to previous deaths and the fact that Damien had, tried to get people to think about what could be done in terms of demanding that institutions like the University of Chicago change its relationship to the community. And it's really in the wake of Damien's death that the trauma center, that idea of kind of putting together a campaign around the trauma center really took hold. And I'm not going to say anything else about Matt because I don't want him to get like agitated. So I'm not going to talk about like how much we were, organizing out of his car. And this is back when he had not the cleanest car in the world.
You have 1 minute to diss Matt, and then you have to end.
Okay, I'm not dissing Matt. I just want to say I'm not going to talk about how
remaining.
It was a time when most of our banners were basically pilfered from the University of Chicago student organization resource center. And that never happened because I know this call is being recorded, so I wouldn't say anything like that. But it was a really amazing and dynamic, it was really amazing and dynamic development. We did these really powerful die-ins on the campus of the University of Chicago. Some of you all might have a hard time putting it in context because at this point, the idea that the University of Chicago would have a trauma center or even think about it would sort of be self-evident. But there was a long period of time where we had to debate with people about whether or not it was even sort of a worthwhile proposition in the first place. And I remember the fight that we had just to be able to get like an open forum with members of the UFC administration, folks in the hospital. And at one point, a really pissed off Alex Goldenberg grabbing the microphone and being like, the only reason why we're talking about this in the first place is because, it's Black youth who are dying on the South Side of Chicago. And if this was a question that was impacting UFC students, we wouldn't be having the conversation the same kind of way, right? And the sort of dismissiveness and the lack of any sense of caring about the common good that the university is demonstrating wouldn't be the norm, and people wouldn't see it as acceptable. And then the way in which that campaign blended with organizing on campus around GSU, the development of SSN, and the mental health campaign, and the way in which that took off in a really amazing way, from the attempt to occupy the Woodlawn Mental Health Center to the sort of like standout occupation that we did of the abandoned lot outside the mental health center.
40 days, man. 40 days.
20 days, man.
40.
Yeah.
40 days. That's all I
how
can
all
tell
this how all this was happening during Occupy. It was a really I really feel blessed when I look back on it, because I think the thing that that really sits with me, and Duff, I'm gonna wrap up, so don't get too agitated. The thing that really sits with me, when I look back on the period, is in part it was about the victories that we were able to win, but it was really amazing to have to be a part of something bigger than myself. It was really amazing to be in the struggle with people, and to be in the struggle in a way where you had comrades, you had friends, you had folks who had your back, and you had theirs. And to understand that, there was a lot of rough spots, but at the same time, there was a real sense of solidarity and a real sense of how we could come together, even if it was just a small group of us, to do something amazing. And, I don't know if you got that sense looking back on those pictures in terms of the possibility that exists, but just think about it, like, there are definitely points where I'm like, man, and I'm not talking about Matt's car, but we were kind of a raggedy group of folks at certain points, and we were able to, despite how raggedy we were able to do some amazing work.
Sorry.
And that was it. It's just a really beautiful thing when you get to reminisce and to see how having a kind of long-term engagement with a certain group of folks, what kind of difference that makes for the world around you and for yourself. And so I would just encourage people to think about how they could think about being a part of STOP over kind of make a long-term commitment, and what that could look like in terms of being in a position where they could see how much they've changed and how much the organization has changed years down the line. So I'll leave it there.
Yes.
And looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yes,
Duff.
I think the floor is going to have to be seated for 30 seconds to Vee.
Cause I ain't never raggedy, and I ain't never been raggedy, and maybe you was raggedy, and that's fine for you. But speak for you, I was never raggedy. Yes, Matt's car was raggedy. That van Alex was driving was raggedy. But me personally, don't say we was raggedy. Okay.
Yeah, don't call me raggedy.
I really don't see how Matt is letting a bald head tooth throw him this much shade. Like a man whose locks was almost longer than him. You just gonna let him talk about you like this?
That's what I was gonna say. I want to
All
hear.
right, all right, all right,
Hold
all
on.
right, all right. Shh. Before, just to clear the floor, I will say I was raggedy. I would look back on myself and I was like, man, I was raggedy. I'm a lot smoother now. I'm a lot cleaner now. But back then, I was
Yeah.
raggedy. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Sorry.
I'll leave it that way.
Information has been accepted from Vee. Moving along to our next opportunity to hear from a new generation that is not raggedy. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, David. David is a student in astrophysics and can tell us a lot about the CBA campaign. And I can't wait to hear. Let's welcome him.
All right, thank you all for having me. Yeah, so hi y'all, I'm David. You see him his pronouns. I'm a graduate student up in the astrophysics department at University of Chicago. And yeah, I've been, I guess like going back a little bit, like to kind of explain like how I got involved with the CBA campaign. Yeah, I grew up in the city of Chicago. I'm all the way up at Howard Street in Rogers Park, so like way up north. And so yeah, I remember back in senior year of high school when, that was when, that was like, I remember like that May in 2015 when it was announced that the Obama Presidential Center was going to come to Chicago. And I remember like, all of my friends at the time who were from Woodlawn and from Washington Park, because like, those were like the two locations to where the center was going to be at. Like, folks were stressed out, worried about if they're going to be able to stay in their neighborhoods. Like, and like, like, even though I'm all the way up north, like, Woodlawn and Washington Park have always both felt like second homes to me. And so, I've always been worried about like, are all my friends going to be here? And, like, are they going to be able to stay? And so like, even though like a couple months later, I then had to go to undergrad out in the East Coast. I've been like, following the CBA campaign when it like was first starting to get, when it was starting up, when they announced that the center was going to be in Jackson Park. And so, I've been like following along the CBA campaign, seeing the fight for affordable housing, making sure that there's support for Black businesses, Black workers, and specifically for Black folks in the neighborhood. Making sure that like, not just being like direct about it, like making sure that the center isn't for like, like middle class, like wealthy Black folks, making sure that's for like low income Black folks who are from the neighborhood or from, places like Grove Park, who have like, like they've literally built up the culture of the neighborhood, like making sure that, they're the ones that like benefit from the center, making sure that they get to stay in the neighborhood and like, aren't like, and, not have like some folks from out of town decide what's happening in their community. Like, I've been following along with that campaign and, I've been like seeing like, all the great work that's been going on and that like, when, I still remember that like, during summer break in 2017, when as those plans were moving forward for the center to be built in Jackson Park, like Obama had like this whole like event at McCormick Place where to essentially like invite folks from the community in order for folks to see his vision of what Jackson Park would look like once he built his center. And so I remember like folks from the CBA campaign, like, like literally staying like overnight just to get into the event. And then seeing them like, because this is like Obama while he was like going from like the webcam, like saying in front of the CBA campaign's faces when they asked for a community benefits agreement, him saying that like, hey, look, I don't want folks coming out of the woodwork saying like, oh, I have to sign this, or I have to sign that. And, like, that's not how it's going to be. Like, that's not how I view a community process. A community process means everyone has to get all stakeholders involved, making sure to listen to all sides of the story. And that was honestly one of the most disrespectful events I've ever seen in my life. Like, the former president of the United States telling a bunch of a lot of low-income Black folks who were told that, like, your voice is important in your community, but there are other voices that we need to listen to as well. And then just hearing and like, and then just seeing like I was thinking like a whole row of like, many, I would say like much wealthier, like Black folks, like celebrating and supporting Obama, saying like, yeah, that's right, go tell them. And I was just getting like my blood boiled. I was getting like pretty upset. I'm still even like remembering it, so like how intense those emotions were. And so, you know, like, but however, I felt like, you know, I felt like pretty useless because, you know, I'm all the way out in the East Coast, I'm all the way out on the East Coast for school. I couldn't, like, you know, there's not much I could like practically do. And so, like, you know, once, you know, I got the acceptance letter in 2019 to start, like, you know, to get like a PhD at UChicago, I knew that I wanted to get like in some way involved in affordable housing when I'm back in my city, specifically with like the CBA campaign. Like that was when like the first CBA ordinance was actually introduced. And there was like a lot of momentum for a campaign. This was like summer 2019. And, you know, like it seemed like there was a very like, you know, like there was a lot of momentum going on. Like, you know, you were having both the new alderwoman, Jeanette Taylor, as well as Hairston out in the 5th Ward, like both pushing forward with like many different organizations such as STOP, such as BYP 100, such as UChicago Against Displacement, such as COCO. And like, you know, it seemed like this was like, you know, going to be like a very like, you know, amazing moment where like, you know, like community organizations and people like are able to take control of their neighborhood, take control of like what their land gets used for, and rather than some outside groups. And like, you know, I was like feeling really optimistic and stuff. Then came December of 2019, where Mayor Lightfoot at the time said that, like, yeah, we're going to introduce our own plan for Woodlawn. Oh, and also the CBA, it's only going to be for like this 3/5 area around the center. You know, like completely ignoring Washington Park, completely ignoring South Shore, and like even like parts of West Woodlawn. And like, you know, I would say, you know, next to Obama, like, you know, at McCormick Place saying like the words he said, that felt like the second biggest like disrespect I ever heard about like the CBA campaign. It's like, you know, that got me like super angry. So I remember like showing up to the Woodlawn town hall that many or community groups were hosting. That's actually like, I remember encountering Jawanza there, and because I've seen him before in like other affordable housing events. He's one of the heads for COCO, and saying that like, you know, I should get involved with the campaign, as well as like, you know, other members from like such as Noah Moskowitz from One Northside, saying that like, you know, like you should, if you're like, you know, this interested in joining, you should consider like joining UChicago Against Displacement, or other like student groups. And, you know, at first I was hesitant because, you know, I view UChicago as like this evil place. I don't want to get much involved, like, you know, I don't want to be like anywhere near that place, even though I have to. But, you know, he was like but Noah was like really talking about like, you know, all the amazing work that like students have done to support residents and support folks to like make sure that like, you know, all the affordable housing gets rebuilt for Grove Park, make sure that the trauma center got built, like telling me like, you know, like students like have like a lot of like influence and power to like make sure and support and stand in solidarity for folks out in Woodlawn, folks out in Washington Park. And like, you know, that's when I started like, you know, that's when I started like opening up for the idea that like, oh, maybe I can get involved with UChicago Against Displacement and like push for a CBA campaign. And so, yeah, like that's when, you know, like, that's when I started like showing up a little over a year ago to make sure that like, you know, this watered down proposal that the mayor introduced wouldn't get like watered down even more, making sure that like, you know, we at least brought back some of the elements that the CBA group introduced. And so, you know, I made sure that like, you know, like that's when I like started getting involved with like setting up like some of the town hall events, setting up some like, you know, making sure to attend some of the like, you know, like meetings that are like meant to be closed off to the public and only to like select few members. That way, like, you know, the city can move forward with their own plans, like making sure like my voice was heard, making sure like, you know, I was loud, and like saying like, you know, this is like messed up that like you're ignoring like a huge group of your people just so that we can get this one center built to benefit few a select group. And so yeah, like so that's where like, you know, like that's where it then eventually like culminated into last summer, where there's a 10 city event where essentially we occupied like a whole block of city owned land. And essentially it was this 24-hour long event where we said that like, you know, we demand like we demand a CBA ordinance, we demand affordable housing for Woodlawn, we demand that this land is our land and that we get to decide what goes on it. And yeah, so like, you know, that then, you know, I remember folks saying at the beginning of the day when they called the city hall and they said like, you know, we're not going to budge on our initial proposal, it's going to stay what it is. once y'all realized how big the event was getting and like, you know, how much momentum there was and how, you know, like really they weren't like, you know, that like, you know, like they were no longer the ones controlling the narrative. They realized, oh, don't worry, we'll give you, you know, a quarter of the land to you. We'll give you, make sure that there's like affordability guaranteed for 2 decades. Like, you know, once I like, you know, that jolt of momentum showed that like, you know, like really, like, you know, like got me even like more propelled to make sure that like, you know, these benefits were given to Woodlawn, and then wanting to make sure that like, you know, these benefits then get extended out to Washington Park, to South Shore, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier, all my friends who were from Washington Park, from Woodlawn, they no longer live there anymore, and like, you know, like it no longer like, you know, like it no longer feels like I have like all the people I know there anymore, and so, you know, making sure that this doesn't happen, like other folks in the neighborhood don't get displaced from their community, like that's something that, you know, I think about all the time and want to keep fighting for. And so yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, David. I want to congratulate you for not using the word raggedy. All right. So folks, stay tuned. There's a lot more happening. There's a music video at the end if you stay all the way past the hour. But now something even more important, we have breakout rooms. So we're going to set up some breakout rooms. Be patient if it takes a minute, because we are bursting. We have double the audience I expected. So I think Adam is setting us up with breakout rooms right now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we're all ready.
They're all ready. So, you know, Adam, feel free to make more moderators if you need them. So the real purpose of the breakout room is to give us a chance to talk to each other again. And there's an overarching question that I've come up with, or that we came up with, and that is this: what is your life's tradition of organizing? What is your life's tradition of organizing? Let's spend a few minutes thinking about that together. So go into your breakout room, join it. If you end up in the main room by accident, I'll kick you out. So get in a great breakout room right now. All right, folks, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good time. I only wish, if I'd known we had this many people, if I had planned appropriately, we would have had twice as many breakout rooms. But we've got plenty of time to talk at the end. We're keeping the Zoom open as long as you can talk at the end of this event. For now, let's be organized, though. There are 2 minor items to be broadcast. One is that we're recording. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. And if for some reason you don't want to be recorded, make sure you don't say anything that you don't want to be recorded, or text me, let me know. And I'd like to thank very much the breakout room leaders. That was good work. And finally, I would like to recognize somebody who has been here practically from the beginning of STOP, and that is Eliza. So thank you, Eliza, for your many years of activism long before I was involved. All right, next we have a moment for asks. And this moment, I'm going to turn over to Dominic. Pardon me, I'm sorry. Dominic, you don't have to do this. I'm turning this moment over to William.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm William, he, him pronouns. For those of you who don't know me, I graduated from U of C in 2017, so I was around for the end of the Trauma Center campaign and the beginning of the CVA campaign. We have raised over $1,000 with this event so far, which is amazing. So thank you to everybody who's donated so far. Those one-time donations will go a long way, but it's also really important for an organization like STOP to have monthly donors, because those recurring donations help them know what their budget is going to be into the future. Now, I'm a graduate student, so I don't have any money, but I do spend a lot of money on cheese. So I recently signed up to donate $5 a month, because I can definitely cut $5 a month out of my cheese budget. So I hope that you will go to stopchicago.org/donate and join me in donating at least $5 a month. Though if you have a real job, I would encourage you to give more than that, you know, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 100, whatever you can. So we'll put the link in the chat again, so you can go do it right now. And when you do, tell us about it in the chat to encourage other people, okay? So thank you for supporting STOP's work and for being here today. It's great to see all these people.
Thank you, William. So we're going to give you a few minutes to do that. And so while we're spending a few minutes on that, I'm going to share some pictures. Let's see if I can make it work. Okay, I can't resist.
Oh,
That's my child.
Yes, baby.
with the fist in the air. With the fist in the air.
Next generation continuing the struggle, folks.
There you go.
You taught
There
him
you
that,
go.
right? Or her, you taught.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, absolutely. It was so my child was born one day after, my child missed being born on the 14th of July by just 1.5 hours. And it was a C-section, which made it even worse. But all right, let's take a look at another picture while we're waiting. Anybody remember this one? Many of you are in the picture.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, I can see literally about half of the people here half the people in the picture are in the room today, including well, I don't see Evan Lyons here, but that's him with the coat.
Mm.
Let's see if we can do one more picture while we're waiting for those donations to roll in.
Duff, everybody was wearing a coat in that photo.
Yes, I'm sorry. Let's take a second look. The lab coat. Those lab coats lived for quite a while in Susan Gesch's office in a large box that she tolerated. So the white lab coat on the left. One more photo.
That was Dr. Bear.
This one has a story, but I don't know it. Anybody know this story?
The fifth floor.
I am kind of center left. Noah, you're in that picture. And that was from 2 weeks before the pandemic, when we put on adult diapers and refused to leave the ground in front of the mayor's office, and paved the way for the CBA agreement that the ordinance mayor backed. That's my story.
From raggedy to adult diapers, this meeting is going downhill. So let's wrap up our donation time and move to our next moment. So I think next we're going to hear some words from somebody who's been around for a long time and has inspired many of us, and that's Vee. Vee, are you ready to give us some wisdom?
I am. Okay, so first I want to say hi to some of you who I haven't seen in so freaking long. I didn't know like what the audience for this group was gonna be. Like I read the stuff that Dominic sent me, obviously, but I didn't expect it to be like majority like alumni University of Chicago students, particularly alumni who's been a part of SHE. So I'm like, I just want to say y'all look old, and real grown, and that's really cool. And yeah, so Dominic asked me to talk about memories and particularly at the point of the Trauma Center campaign in which the students joined. Because I'm Black, so of course I look the same way I looked when y'all met me when I was 18. So I don't know how that Black thing skipped twos, but you know, it's unfortunate. But anyhow, I think at the point in which we organized students, it was very early into the campaign. Yes, Michael, you will always be 18. It was super early into the campaign because we understood from a strategy standpoint. I mean, Toos, that's your fault. Nobody told you to do that. We knew that we needed to have students a part of the campaign in order to build our strategy out into a certain direction. The idea was that the Trauma Center was necessary on the south side of Chicago. And although it was an issue that predominantly impacted Black people, and it was an issue being fought for, championed by young Black people, it was a very strategic route to also emphasize the rhetoric that this was something that impacted everybody, right? It may have been young Black people who were dying the most from gun violence, but if there was a University of Chicago student, you know, injured, shot, hit by a car, they also need a trauma center campaign. I mean, not a campaign, but a trauma center at the University of Chicago. And so I think the rhetoric and the language behind that meant putting the people in the room to represent that part of the rhetoric. And that's how the coalition built itself out, right? Through faith committees and through, you know, us working with nurses and different things like that. It was important for us through the coalition to represent, you know, these different communities that had this stake in this issue, that, and also had a stake in affirming that, you know, Black lives deserve the type of resources that white people get all the time, right? Without question or without hesitation. And so bringing the students in for me was a no-brainer from a strategy standpoint, but it was also complicated from the aspect of it's two different worlds combining it. And essentially you wouldn't think that, but y'all went to school on campus at the University of Chicago, which is blocks away from like where our base was in Woodlawn, but it was a world apart in terms of and just taking our young people on campus during the summer to run summer programs. They could see how different life is for young people who are living on this campus compared to people who are their same age, 2 and 3 blocks away. So I think much like a lot of other things that you do where you're combining people from different backgrounds, you're really concerned about, you know, how that's gonna go. But what I think was really important about the particular group of young people that were participating in student organizing work at that time, for one, there was a decent amount of young people who were in leadership that were like of color, like Akshaya, and some other folks, Shiro, and there were just there were Black and brown USC students who participated in this campaign. And I think having that also created the type of dynamic in which, you know, there was ability for us to build relationships among that and like around that. And also the ability for us to have conversation about how University of Chicago students could use their privilege in support of the campaign. And that was really an important conversation that came about when we started to do direct actions. And that's what we were just talking about in a little bit in our breakout session. So the first time I ever got arrested, one of the first direct actions that the campaign ever had was the one at the CDC before it was open. And, you know, the intention was to like do a sit-in during this architectural tour that they were doing. And a few of us get arrested, and nobody that was supposed to get arrested got arrested. 2's caught felony charges for whatever random ass reason. Well, the police attacked him and then charged him. And then the goal right before that was for young people like Stassi, and just after that, right, along the lines, young people like Patrick and Ro, and like everyone who's participated in action, that was always with the root and the intention of the fact that the young people on campus, right, exist in this ability to where they can use the access and the privilege that they have to garner the type of attention that the campaign needed at that point. It was at a point in which we needed to escalate, we needed to push further. And our young people in Woodlawn were not able to get arrested, right? There were a lot of young people who were going through different type of things legally already that didn't allow them to participate in direct actions, you know, at all, not even in a sense of like strategically, just in general. We couldn't have that. So for me, bringing the students into the work that we did was really important. And I think just like overall memories of participating in the Trauma Center campaign, now that I've had like a lot of time. So for just to like, and I guess I was telling folks in our breakout group, but the question was asked, you know, like, where am I at and like, where have I been? Because if folks may or may not notice, I haven't been organizing in the city of Chicago since 2016. And it was a very hard decision to make. So at I guess you could say the end of the Trauma Center campaign, it was kind of rolling over into CBA stuff. And I very vividly remember having to convince Alex about the CBA campaign. Because Alex wasn't necessarily convinced at first that the CBA was where our energy should be redirected at that point. And I think for me, it was like you were saying earlier, there was a rage inside of me that existed around this idea of this library being put in my neighborhood. And now for sure, like it wasn't a for sure thing then, but it's being placed across the street from the high school that I went to, the field that our class reunions and just like gym classes and things like that are supposed to happen. This field is now being consumed with this like institution that's got shit to do with shit as far as any actual body's real life is concerned. And it was important for me to continue the type of work. The Trauma Center was important not just for the sake of getting a trauma center at the University of Chicago, but that work was important to me to show that direct action had its place in political climates to change things, to impact things. It was an accurate strategy. The work that, the model of work that was important for me to use as a strategist in the Trauma Center campaign is what fed to the type of work that led to the Buy Anita campaign, which if folks may or may not be aware with, was a campaign that removed Anita Alvarez from the state's attorney office after the Laquan McDonald scandal was public and everybody had all the information that the city didn't want to give up. And I think what people get lost on a lot of times is that we do this work from a place when we're talking about, you know, our legacy and our life and like, what does our legacy of organizing look like? Particularly for me, I do this work from a place of, and I'm always saying it's lived experience. It's not a place of how, you know, probably how a lot of y'all came to this work, right? Reading something, like seeing something, being exposed to something through a like academic level or things like that, right? I come through this work by being a young Black person from the South Side of Chicago and experiencing what it's like to live through those experiences. And I think some of the struggles that I've had in this work is also related to that, right? We did a lot in those 5 years, especially after that botched first direct action. And there was a lot for us to figure out. And, you know, it wasn't real to me in the moment how much I was actually holding in all that time frame. It's like I can recall speaking to at least every single person on this call one-on-one at some point or another in those 5 years. And the amount of work that takes, and then to also then still organize in other ways. And so for me, my legacy of organizing has always looked like organizing within organizing. Doing this work for me as a young Black person wasn't easy. And the spaces that I was in, spaces that I felt like should have been created to make it easy for me, in some ways made it harder for me. I think a lot of the decision I had when I decided to leave STOP, as important as the organization that STOP has been on the South Side, was because there was still a lot more work that I felt like we needed to do to grow internally, right? In terms of understanding how do we actually build relationships with people, right? Not in the sense of the task of calling folks, making one-on-ones, but the approach of how do we care about our folks and the actions of doing this work. And for me, I think a lot of times where we sell ourselves short, and particularly what I've experienced in these spaces in Chicago that's created, is that there's not a lot of intention put into the how we are doing what we're doing and the way we go about doing what we're doing. So I think what I learned and I gained most from the Trauma Center campaign was as important as it is for me to stick to my guns and what I know far as politics and strategy and all that good stuff. It's important to stick to what I knew and to every day exist in what I know to be true as how you organize, particularly Black people, and then how you organize young people in a way that isn't just bringing them together to mobilize, but bringing them together to build relationships that are going to be able to combat a system that seeks to destroy them in every level of the sense, right? Not just through an institutional basis, but also through a relationship basis, through a home-based basis. And I think for me, what was missing at STOP, and I think what a lot of organizations like STOP still need to figure out how to do, is how do we build relationships that last past the work? Because the problem that existed, and not just like relationships, but people, I have been told, right, even in the work that I do now, is that I'm one of the most trained organizers that people come across. And I tell people that comes from the investment that STOP put into training me as an organizer, like sending me and other young people to trainings to learn facilitation and to learn how, you know, you do this work in a way that is with method to it and with purpose to it, right? But I think what I miss and what a lot of times get lost in this type of work that we do, particularly works that are based around campaign, is building the type of things that are going to last past the work itself. So when the Trauma Center campaign ended, my next jump was another campaign, right? And then the next jump was another campaign. And then, as most folks on this call know, Fly disbanded in a very toxic and volatile way. And the work after that, for some folks, looked like it needed to be to keep pushing forward, right? And moving in that and just to rebuild, I guess. But what I think is important to understand is what we do isn't just building campaigns. What we do as organizers, and particularly Black organizers, isn't just building campaigns and coalitions. What we're doing is building a relationship for folks to liberate themselves. And these campaigns and these organizations simply exist as containers to do that. And the responsibility that these organizations have and have to take up if this work is going to advance into the place where it can go further, right? Given the type of summer that we've seen this past summer, right? Those relationships that people build, experiencing looting and rioting and first, those things have to be nurtured and manifested in a way that allows this work and those people to continue together in unison. And a lot of times what happens is we prioritize the work itself. And so the work gets to where it needs to get to, right? The Trauma Center got to where it needed to get to in terms of a campaign. But I myself as an organizer suffered one of the most major losses I had ever experienced in my entire life. And it caused me to have to step away, not only from, you know, the organization that I had invested 5 years in, but from the work that I had invested my soul, my mind, my literal body to. And it sent me on one of the most depressive periods of my life that I've ever experienced. And it's taken 3 to 4 years for me to get back to a place to where I can sit on a panel and talk about this work and have these conversations and do those things. And so I'm proud of the work that I've done, right? And the memories that I have. But what I've learned now as where I am now as an organizer is to be honest about what was missing, right? Where we fell short, and also where, you know, in particular places, other folks who were in charge of certain things and responsible for certain things and responsible for controlling these containers also fell short, right? And I hold some responsibility in that as a staff person at STOP, and then there is some responsibility I don't hold in that as a young Black organizer who is learning and trying to, you know, thrive in the work that I love to do. And so for me, I think that's where like my memories and like where my mind and things exist right now as far as the Trauma Center campaign goes. And it's hard for me a lot of times to have these conversations because I think most folks are like, the Trauma Center campaign, that was so amazing. It was so inspiring. You did so much work. You inspired so many people, fucking badass. And I'm like, yeah, but to some degree, there's a failure in that. And I think that it's a bit sobering to say that. And I know some folks may be like, how can you say that? And contagious and with the Trauma Center campaign, but the failure in that is that FLY didn't sustain itself after the Trauma Center campaign. Youth organizing as a whole in the city didn't necessarily advance, right, in a certain level in which you would think it would after a youth organization pushes an institution like the University of Chicago into the type of defeat that the Trauma Center pushed the institution in. And I think that for me, the breakdown of that I realized is in how we built these things. It's all about how we built them. There were a lot of things about FLY that was just built wrong from the jump. And it was put on individuals who participated in the chaos, you know, in some ways, and not necessarily acknowledged from how this thing came together was flawed, right? And there were opportunities and places to fix those things so that the outcome could have been different, but the priority was always the work. It was always the campaign.
1 more minute.
Always the things. Sure, Duff, I got you. So I think that's my ramble of like memories and how I reconcile, right, with the Trauma Center campaign work and like just like my 2 cents on like both STOP as an organization, but like also the type of relation, because like, and this is the last thing I'll say and I swear I'm done. For me, when I'm doing work within the organization, right, it's important for me to acknowledge with folks that there is no one organization that, for Black people, there is no one organization that's going to free us. There isn't. There's no one organization, there's no one silo of work that's going to get the things done that people really need to get done to live the type of life that we say we want to live when we say Black Lives Matter and to liberate all Black people. So I think people have to be honest about that in their work when they're doing that and figure out how are we prioritizing the whole of our social justice movement and the places that we exist in it, and how are we holding ourselves responsible to a social justice movement overall, right? Holding ourselves accountable to the work that we do as a whole, not just accountable to the work that we set out to do as an organization, as an individual, but how do all these things work in tandem so that we can build a movement of the masses. That's it.
Vee, thank you for that seriousness. We get the failed utopia we deserve, so let's deserve a good one. All right, our next speaker, housing organizer from New York City, is going to spend a few minutes telling us about memories. Natalie, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Duff. And yeah, so great to see everyone. And thank you so much, Vee, for sharing those reflections. I would love to listen to you more, but I know we're almost at the end of the night, so I will just say a few things quickly and then we'll wrap up. But yeah, it's so great to be here and to see everyone. My name is Natalie. I graduated in 2017, so I was involved with Students for Health Equity and the Trauma Center campaign, as well as like the Trauma Center Prayers, which I guess became the Prayer and Action Collective, and the beginning of the CBA campaign as well. And yeah, I mean, I just kind of been reflecting about like what I learned. Like, I feel like I learned so much. I learned how to organize through my time with STOP and the Trauma Center campaign. And, you know, so much of my like politics and my like worldview were shaped during that time. And I literally joined like the Trauma Center campaign like the first week I was at UChicago when I got like canvassed on the quad. So just yeah, like really, it was really like foundational for me in my time there. And I guess kind of like related to what we talked about in like my breakout group and kind of what you were saying, Vee, is like one thing that really struck me or really saved me is like STOP really taught me the the power and the need for like really bold demands and really like bold and direct actions. Like I kind of remember in our time with the Trauma Center campaign, it was like one like super intense action. This is how it feels like looking back. It was just like kind of like one super intense action after the other, like arrests. Like I remember like, you know, we all got arrested on Michigan Avenue, and then like a couple months later, folks were like occupying the administration building, and then like a bunch of people got arrested, and then we were still trying to plan like 6 actions for the rest of alumni weekend. But it was, and I mean, it was like successful in terms of like you were really able to see how the administration moved, and like the campaign was able to win the Trauma Center. And yeah, and but I guess like the other thing was it did like take a lot out of people. And I think like for me also like kind of what you said, Vee, about like the importance of the how we do the work. I think that was like one of the biggest things I like took away from my time organizing with that campaign. I'd also say like that those actions really, I think, I don't know, it was really like foundational for me just to show like kind of like power, and like the power we had, like just participating in an action like that like felt very powerful. So yeah, just a couple more things. I feel like one other thing, like I feel like this work really was foundationally, as I said, and like I'm really grateful, and I was able to like really learned a lot of the skills of organizing, like strategizing, canvassing, running meetings, like all those things, working in coalitions, planning actions. And yeah, like I work kind of doing organizing now, so that was like kind of the basis for that. And I also feel like I really like in a lot of ways like developed my kind of worldview in those spaces. So like I was recently just at a workshop where we were asked to reflect on like when did we realize things were unjust, and when did we realize like we had to be the one to be involved in changing things. And I definitely think that like being at UChicago and being involved in the Trauma Center campaign was when I realized like not only like could I be involved, but like kind of like in my role as like a student and as like part of someone with a lot of like privilege and as part of this institution that like enacts so much violence, like I kind of had to be part of changing those dynamics. And I was really grateful for the opportunity to do that and to like kind of participate in the campaign and fight the university every way we could and do everything we could to undermine it. And I guess just to wrap it up, the last thing I would say is just like, I guess we've kind of been all over the place in terms of timeline, but just like all the different campaigns that came out of the Trauma Center campaign and Students for Health Equity and this kind of like lineage of organizing was stopped. So when the Trauma Center campaign ended, we definitely were like had the skills to start our own campaign. So like when we won the Trauma Center, a group of us started to look at other ways that UChicago was profiting off of, or participating and profiting off of like racist and violent systems. And we ended up starting SWAP, Students Working Against Prisons, while also continuing to work on the CBA campaign. And that campaign later went on to kind of, and SWAP later went on to start the Care Not Cops campaign, which I was after my time, but it's really amazing, along with UChicago United, and have been doing really amazing work around defunding UCPD. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear about the student work that's happening now, and I'm really excited to see what comes next and to figure out how we can continue to support as alumni. So that's it. I'll wrap up. And yeah, thanks again, everyone.
All right, Natalie, thank you for showing us a road into a different kind of future. SWAP. All right, so I think we're almost done. There's a music video, but before we get there, I think, David, you had an invitation for current students about joining the actions that you're involved in. Please take it away.
Wait, you're talking to me?
Yeah, I was told that you might have some good ideas about current students and what they could do if they wanted to get more involved.
Oh, I guess I hadn't really planned for this section. Yeah, I don't know. I guess if you like want to get involved, like, like you're giving me a minute to reflect on this. I guess what I mean by for current students, do you mean by those at UChicago, what they could do here?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, obviously going to promote UChicago Against Displacement, we're continuing to, do like make sure that there's CBA extended out to Washington Park, out to South Shore. There's also like a lot of great work with Care Not Cops. Like they've been doing a lot to have UChicago defund and eventually abolish the UChicago Police Department, because, you know, like the UCPD could like pretty much surveils everything from 39th all the way down to 64th without like, you know, any like all as like a private police force, like without having to like, you know, give input to anyone outside, like anyone who's not part of the university. They've been doing a lot of good work. UChicago United has been doing some work regarding like, you know, going on strike and like saying that like, you know, we won't stand for like, you know, like these like, you know, like these like small diversity efforts that the university keeps pushing if they don't make any like substantial change to support Black and brown folks. Yeah, those are like the like 3 groups I can name. Here in Chicago, what we're specifically focusing on is, as I mentioned, extending the CBA out to Washington Park and South Shore. Also trying, like, you know, we're trying to see if we can get involved with Left for Ban to make sure that there's rent control and protections for renters in Chicago. Yeah, I guess, as well as like, you know, also pressuring like the new admin, like the new president that's going to be coming in and saying that like, hey, you know, you can't just like, you know, whichever new person is going to be coming in, like you're going to have to like, you know, pay it forward. You're going to have to make a commitment to support like low income Black folks and like make sure that you help build affordable housing out on the South Side. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, David. And we would be remiss if we didn't hear one more time from Natalie, who has to tell us again about the importance of donation, this time in a slightly different register. Take it away, Natalie.
Yes, thanks, Duff. Yeah, so just bumping one more time, the donation link and we'll drop it in the chat. Somebody can hopefully drop it in the chat. But yeah, we hope many of you committed to donate monthly, but we need both monthly and one-time donations. We've already raised a ton of money for this event. We're hoping to raise a little more and hoping that anyone who hasn't already can chip in to help that goal. And yeah, we're excited to see what STOP is gonna continue to do in the future. And links in the chat. This is the last opportunity to, not the last, but the last in this event, opportunity to donate.
All right, Natalie. So we're going to give you a few minutes to donate while I search for a photo to screen share. I'm going to tell you here's one. I'm going to tell you while I'm putting this up, one of my favorite Matt Ginsberg stories. Matt once said to me that he attended a training with a famous organizer. And the organizer said to him, "I've never been on a campaign that I didn't win." And Matt said, "That means you choose the wrong campaigns." And I think that's so true, right? Like if we only remember the victories or if we pretend like we only ever win, we're doing the wrong thing, right? Like we need to do exactly what you were calling us to, Vee, right? Which is to be serious about the ways that we haven't finished, right? The ways that we're still moving forward. And that's what we do. Like that's what we need to do to be people who are real to the struggle, not people who are real to the victory. So here's a picture that some of you remember. I don't know who laid out all those candles. I'm going to put out another one while you avidly donate.
It was a collective effort of laying out those candles, and it was bad because we didn't do it in a environmentally correct way. We didn't realize that until after the fact was done. Yeah, that was really fucked up. Also, I did not sleep outside that night.
Where were those candles?
Talk about the time you guys walked from UIC all the way to you walked from the University of Chicago all the way to
Let's never talk about that again. We walked down to Northwestern Trauma Center, like from the emergency room at UC to the trauma center at Northwestern downtown. The dumbest action. I don't care what nobody say, that shit was stupid. That was stupid. And I will go on record and say, why the fuck did we do that, Alex? Why did we do that? I think in our strategy session, it was like, it'll get us attention, and it did get us press, but we fucking walked 10 miles.
There was a map. You all had created a map, and it was like a title. It said something like blood trail or something. It showed all of the blood that had been spilled, saying if there was a trauma center here, the blood would not have had, the people died along the way. So I wasn't a part of that. I don't know where I was, probably in class somewhere and with my kids, but I remember you all passed out. It went around and it had red dots on it showing all of the blood that had been shed.
Yeah.
That trail that you all took to Northwestern. It was ridiculous.
Thank you.
I think I saw somebody volunteering in the chat to talk about the time we crept in through the tunnels. Was that true? Okay, fine. I'll tell the story. So we started praying because Aaron Mallory, who is a person of faith, told us quite in no uncertain terms that he believed that if we prayed outside the traumas, that where there needed to be a trauma center, there would eventually be a trauma center. And at that meeting, somebody else got up and said like, oh, that's a great strategy and we should have people ostentatiously come in clerical collars. And Aaron said like, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, if we pray, that will actually make this victory happen. So we started praying and we prayed and prayed and prayed and nobody ever gave us any trouble until one day somebody, and I don't remember who it was, invited the security guard to pray with us. And the security guard said like, oh, sure, I'll pray with you. And then we handed him the trauma center letter and he said, well, if you're from the trauma center, you have to leave. You can just pray, but you can't talk about the trauma center. And we said, no, we're praying for the trauma center. And he said, well, then you have to leave. So after that, for weeks, we would show up and get kicked out until Azim maybe had the idea, remembered that there was a door in the basement of one of the libraries. Which library was it? There was a door in the basement of one of the libraries that led to a series of steam tunnels that would take you straight to the middle of the hospital. And so while the police had already gotten used to us praying in front of the hospital and trying to enter. So at that same time, while they were lined up in front of the hospital waiting for us to come and pray, we went through the steam tunnels and emerged in the middle of the hospital and started our prayer, having snuck through their line of defense. So anybody else have a story?
My favorite action was the last one. I had no idea it was going to be the last one. And you may think that the last action was us barricading ourselves into the admin building, but that wasn't the last action because after we got out of jail, after 2 days, the last action was the one at the church, where the alumni was having that alumni event, and we stormed the church. And I probably was at like a very bad point mentally, because you have to spend 2 days in lockup and then get out. And not even 24 hours later, be bursting through the door of a church of the very institution that just locked your ass up. But I remember just being on fire at that action. It was like I was real rested and slept. Like I remember folks kind of like creeping up to the door, and I was like, no, y'all, we're here to interrupt this. We're not getting invited in. There's nobody's gonna hold the door, show us the seat. We have to beeline through this church, and we did. And they thought they could turn the music up. It was like, no, baby, I came with my own bullhorn. Don't worry about it. That music ain't do shit. That is not even do shit. And the people were so mad. It was unfortunate because I remember, I think one of the members from JCUA got punched outside of the church or something. Like one of the alumni like hit an old white lady. Like, you that angry? You hitting old white women like in public in daylight? And it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. But that was literally my favorite action, because I think, and to go from that was Marla. And to go from like that first direct action that was a complete shit show, entirely out of control, did not go the way that we planned at all, to that last week of action that just seemed like a very well-oiled machine. It was amazing. And to me, that was really a part of the camel. Because like at that point, they had already agreed to the They had already agreed to like raising the age of the Children's Trauma Center. They had decided to finally sit down at the table with us. We didn't know, but they were in talks about putting a trauma center at Holy Cross. And I also think a lot of those conversations at the table, where it was like a very small group of us from the coalition that got to sit down across from the decision makers, finally at the university. And at that table, I think a lot of the energy that I had at that table, which was very volatile. Like there were a lot of those meetings where, not physically, but Alex definitely was just like, okay, just relax. You gotta calm down, because that table was hot and I was heated every time we sat down at that table. But I think it was that energy and those things that made them realize that like, this isn't going to just stop because we want it to, and it isn't going to stop with like small, concessions. And I also think part of it was just like they realized it was just the best fucking thing for you to do. Like, duh, like this doesn't make any sense to do it any other way. If you gonna fucking do it, this makes the most sense.
Folks, we have a request from Lakeisha. Can you unmute yourself for a second?
Mm-hmm. Yes, just going down memory lane with you all. I said it in the small group, just as Duff was cutting us off. Thank you. I want to thank, I'm a community person. I came on board during the interfaith breakfast, the very first interfaith breakfast at University Church. I know it was on March 12th. I'll never forget. I don't remember. The year had to be 2015 or so, I believe. And that's where I came from. So the interfaith and the community, I'm from Hyde Park, graduated from Ray, graduated from Kenwood. And I feel and I live what Vee, it was 2014. I live what Vee said in regards to being a Black woman, a part of the Black community, and being ignored, our issues, our realities being ignored, and to work with students who were willing, as it has been stated, to utilize your privilege, being on that campus in a different capacity. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the past, the alumni. I want to thank the current students. As you see, as you are living, as you have heard, there is still much work to be done. Say Vee and I are regrouping ourselves. We are taking our mental break. I am hiding out down south. I will not publicly say to the larger group where I am, because I am on sabbatical from Chicago, because I had to do this for me. I had to do it for my two children. And I am saying in my thank you that I know it's needed. So you too, you may have to shut yourself off in a bathroom that nobody can disturb you in. Now, many of you have kids, it's the bathroom, okay? Lock the door. And for students who are currently on campus, it's okay to miss a meeting. It's okay to say no. This work is hard, it's heavy. And as was pointed out, you're kind of on the outside and you're helping. Imagine living the pain and being frustrated that you're not being heard about your reality. And you have to allow people to come in to help you. That's a slap in the face. So please be patient with the people you are trying to serve and who you are going out to serve, because they're extremely angry. They have been, it was, what did we say? It was already 4 or 5 years by the time I had met you all. So the interfaith group didn't join to these young Black kids that already been arguing and fighting. And here we come of all different nationalities and denominations saying, all right, what you need us to do? Wait a minute, why weren't y'all heard by yourselves? Oh, because you're young and Black, you don't know what you're talking about. That's a slap in the face. I am bringing you the body of my peer. My homeboy is dead. He died right on your doorstep and you didn't care. And now here we are coming together saying, oh, you're going to care. Oh, you're going to fix this. The people who you're trying to help are hurting in oh my gosh, in so many different ways, so many different ways. So I thank you in advance for your patience. I thank you for letting the pain roll off. Like it's just someone reacting to you and you're like, I'm trying to help. Why are you mad at me? They're not mad at you. They're mad at the system. They're mad at the systems. They're mad at the voices, the minds that did not hear them. So be patient. Be patient. And you all need to take breaks for yourselves, for your mental health. I'm begging you, take those breaks and love yourself. I see the message there. Love yourself. Love each other. Oh my God, Vee. The community. So Vee and I, we're in this Black community that doesn't have a village, that doesn't love each other. You all have each other. I was seeing that while you were speaking. You Chicago students, you have each other. You are able to go back together and be. When we leave meetings, Vee, we're by ourselves. May have some family to go home to or this, that, and the other, but the family's not out there with us. They're like, I don't know why you're doing it. You know, they ain't gonna listen to you. You all were like support, you know? So you all may not feel the loneliness that Vee spoke of, but it's when you may separate and Natalie, she's off in planes and different spaces, you know, but you all still have that camaraderie, that community. We don't have that in the Black community. It's sick. It just shouldn't be, but it's a reality. So that may be another reason why you may face some, you know, just some stupid stuff. You're like, dude, we're here, we're trying to help. There's some deeper pains and issues. And so overall, I'm saying thank you. And thank you for the stuff that you may not even know that's coming. And it may come in the way of pain and anger. Because it's a lot, it's deep. So I thank you, and thank you, Duff, for the opportunity to thank everyone.
That's beautiful. Folks, we need to end. So I'm officially calling this, but let me tell you, all virtuous subjects have their true end outside of themselves. So that means this is going on. So if you need to leave, you're leaving. But if you want to see a music video, stick around. We're not closing the Zoom until the last person leaves. So if you want to share more memories, if you want to strategize about the future, if you want to answer Chewy's very important question, what's our next step, then don't go anywhere. All right.
Duff, hold on. I just want to hear Matt's rebuttal. They've been talking crap about his car and all this, you know. I want to hear Matt's rebuttal.
Here, I thought you were talking about the next campaign, Chewy. All right, well, all right. But I'm declaring it over. Good night for those who are sleepy. It's been wonderful to be with you. For those who remember how to have a 1 a.m. meeting, we'll have a music video up in 1 minute. So good night, and let's figure out this video.